In the small suburban community of Maplewood, life unfolded with the rhythm of neatly trimmed lawns and well-maintained sidewalk. Most houses looked alike, a patchwork of modest homes nestled beneath towering oaks and maples, and their occupants shared generational ties, gossiping over white picket fences and weekend barbecues. For the most part, it was an idyllic setting, but like every neighborhood, it had its undercurrents and fractures. At the heart of Maplewood stood the community's centerpiece, a glistening pool that served as a gathering place for residents. It was here that friendships blossomed, children splashed, and barbecues turned into music-filled potlucks. Unfortunately, amongst the camaraderie, tensions simmered under the surface. New to the neighborhood was Mrs. Eleanor Evans, a sharp-tongued woman known for her staunch opinions and unwavering stance on what she believed was the right way to live. She was in her late 50s, with a neatly coiffed hairstyle and a wardrobe that seemed to scream authority. Mrs. Evans quickly became the subject of whispered conversations at the pool, known as much for her unsolicited advice as for her distinct disdain towards anyone who didn't fit her perception of societal norms. It wasn't long before her antagonistic demeanor came into conflict with another resident, Devin James, a kind-hearted man in his 30s who had moved to Maplewood with aspirations of settling down and raising a family. Devin was well respected in the community, not just for his contributions but for his warmth and geniality. He owned 2 imposing Rottweilers, Max and Bella, who were more than just pets, they were family. They protected his home fiercely, but they were also gentle giants around friends and loved ones. As soon as Devin found himself in Mrs. Evans' crosshairs, he knew the battle lines had been drawn. Devin first encountered Mrs. Evans during a community meeting convened by the Homeowners Association, HOA. It was intended to discuss mundane issues, landscaping guidelines and pool maintenance, but quickly spiraled into something darker when Mrs. Evans began voicing her issues with some residents, including Devin. "Frankly, I think if the pool is going to be a dumping ground for every stray dog and person who doesn't belong, we might as well bulldoze it," she declared, her voice dripping with contempt. "Especially that house over there." She gestured towards Devin's home, her disdain palpable. Devin felt anger rise within him, but he remained composed. "Everyone is welcome here, Mrs. Evans," he said firmly. "This is a community built on respect and acceptance." The room fell silent, tension crackling in the air as the others shifted uneasily, unsure of where to align themselves. Despite the meeting's fallout, summer arrived, and with it, the promise of lazy days by the pool and evening barbecue gatherings. Nevertheless, each time Devin stepped outside, he found Mrs. Evans lounging by the pool, her presence an unwelcome reminder of the meeting's confrontation. Her every glance was laced with judgment, and he could almost feel the weight of her disdain. Devin would watch as she swam laps, often wearing a frosty expression, refusing to acknowledge anyone except her chosen allies. Meanwhile, Max and Bella would play in the yard, their deep growls a reminder of the threat it posed should anyone venture too close to their territory. One evening, after witnessing another unwarranted remark directed towards a couple who shared a brief kiss by the pool, Devin reached his breaking point. He paced back and forth, considering the delicate balance he had maintained. It was clear she was driving wedges into the community, spreading her narrow-minded views like poison. Devin, with a heart heavier than usual, decided a different approach was needed. He resolved to use his dogs not just as protectors, but as his voice, something to counter Mrs. Evans' venomous influence. Once the sun set, he slipped into his backyard, calling the Rottweilers, who bounded eagerly to his side. "Let's take a stroll, boys," he said with a determination in his voice. He wandered towards the poolside, where Mrs. Evans drifted under the glow of pool lights, oblivious to the brooding figure lurking nearby. As he approached, he watched her surface, gasping from beneath the water, only to see his towering dogs at the edge of the pool. The effect was instantaneous. Devin's presence, coupled with the imposing figures of Max and Bella, sent a shiver down her spine. While she attempted to regain her composure, Devon casually nudged the fact that they were there to protect him and that she was crossing a line with her threats. "Perhaps it's time you reconsider the kind of energy you bring into this space," he remarked calmly, his heart thumping. "Everyone deserves to feel safe here, including me and my boys." Over the following weeks, the dynamic between Devon and Mrs. Evans devolved into a game of intimidation and avoidance. Cancerous seeds sown by her past behavior began to sprout fear among the residents. Her persistent threats of bulldozing undesirables only fueled the flames. She would glare at Devon every chance she got, her ambitions seeping into every tiny interaction. Eleanor's tactics soon involved feeding off the whispers of discontent within the community, trying to reshape the narrative in a way that made her the sympathetic figure, the defender of the neighborhood's imagined purity. Devon watched with disbelief as even some of the quieter residents began to entertain her doubts. Frustration mounted for Devon as Alice, a neighbor of considerable influence within the HOA, started siding with Mrs. Evans, making changes to the very rules that had once streamlined neighborly living. Alarmed at the prospect of the pool becoming a battleground, Devon called a meeting of understanding and togetherness with the other residents. "Let's meet and address any concerns together," he proposed. Responding with a mix of support and doubt, the residents gathered, and Devon recounted how Mrs. Evans' hostility had transformed their once great neighborhood into an unsettling place. It was clear that many had felt the same way as whispers of solidarity began to ripple through the room. The energy shifted. Devon could see people rallying together. The tide was turning, and with it came hope. Fueled by the palpable strength of community, and armed with the support of his neighbors, Devon decided it was time for a direct confrontation with Mrs. Evans. It was a deceptively warm evening, the kind that made the sunset glow with promise before the night set in. Devon stood at the pool's edge as Mrs. Evans lounged, her overly confident demeanor suggesting she had little fear of repercussions. "Mrs. Evans," he started, letting the name hang between them, "we need to talk." Surprisingly, she invited him with a wave, as if he were one of her fellow associations rather than the target of her scorn. An expectant silence enveloped the pool area, even the crickets paused to listen. "You've created an atmosphere of fear and hostility," he said firmly. "And it's time we set the record straight. Your actions hurt not just us but the integrity of our community." Mrs. Evans' cool facade cracked slightly. She opened her mouth to retort, but Devon didn't allow her space. "I won't let fear guide my life. Nor will I let you instill it in our neighbors," he continued, the unwavering support of his audience giving him strength. "Max and Bella and I will be here to protect what truly matters, our right to be ourselves without the chokehold of judgment." In that moment, uncertainty flickered for Mrs. Evans. She was cornered, and slowly but surely, the laughter and conversation surrounding them intertwined, growing louder. From that day forward, the tides began to shift once again. As people began to unify under common values of acceptance and camaraderie, Mrs. Evans found herself increasingly isolated, a fallout that echoed in the fulfillment of her own measure of discord. As summer stretched on, something wonderful happened within Maplewood. Barbecues turned to dinners, laughter echoed louder, and children splashed joyfully in the pool, free from the confines of hesitation. Max and Bella became the spirit of that summer, a comforting presence that let everyone know that there was strength in unity, love, and respect for all, no matter where they came from. As days turned to weeks, Devon looked out at the pool shining under the new warmth of community connection. The exploration prompted by one woman's hardness had led them into a deeper understanding of what their community could become, a tapestry woven by different threads, each person adding their own unique value. In the end, Mrs. Evans watched the joy continuing without her, and as she stood alone, it became evident that the laughter she endeavored to suppress was alive and thriving. The change swept over Maplewood like the smooth glide of a pool's surface, amplifying every hope, dream, and aspiration held dear. For all who were part of it, Devon's community had rebuilt its spirit, one that would endure through that summer and beyond. And in that victory, surrounded by loyal friends and oh so protective Rottweilers, Devon knew they'd built something profoundly beautiful, a haven where acceptance ruled and love prevailed.